part of it was using running as a way to mourn my father, and part of it was recognizing that I had been unable to conceive at a deep level that I could be faster than I had been before I gotten thyroid cancer and I was 30 years old. And I had had this terrible medical experience at age 30. Right before I'd run a 243. Right afterwards, I'd run all these 243s. And so when I realized how interesting the reasons for my mid-40s speed were, I realized that there's a bigger story to write about running and about the way that our psychology pushes us forward, holds us back, what our parents give us, what we give our children, and the way that running allows us to process pain and also create pain.
Today I speak with Nick Thompson, the CEO of The Atlantic, the host of the podcast, The Most Interesting Thing in AI, and the author of the book, The Running Ground, Father, a Son, and the Simplest of Sports, which is available now. Nick and I talk all about the process of writing this book, which took him 5 years. It's a memoir of his lifetime of running and his relationship to his father, who was a marathon runner himself. His dad is quite simply one of the most unusual and compelling characters you're going to encounter in a book. Nick also does a lovely job at exploring some of the recent history of distance running and weaving it all together in The Running Ground. And he also shares with us his challenge to himself in his 40s to become the best possible marathon runner that he could become, how he leveraged sports science, changed his training, his diet. He shares with us in great detail everything that he did in order to break 2:30 in his mid-40s in the marathon. So all that and much more. Here's my conversation with Nick Thompson. First things first, this book, it's a complex book. Tell me about the origin story of this book. It's a memoir. It looks at sports science. It's extremely personal in parts. There's a bit of history in there. You landed the plane.
Thank you.
But how did it begin?
It began with this question of why did I get faster in my 40s than in my 30s, right? I trained hard in my 30s and I'd run all these 240 marathons. In my 40s, I ran a 229. So the question is that's not supposed to happen. Why did that happen? And then as I was thinking through that, and some of it was just physiological. I trained a little better. I ate a little better, slept a little more, had some new devices, better shoes. But a lot of it was buried deep psychologically. And it was about, part of it was using running as a way to mourn my father. And part of it was recognizing that I had been unable to conceive at a deep level that I could be faster than I had been before I gotten thyroid cancer and I was 30 years old. And I had had this terrible medical experience at age 30. Right before I'd run a 243. Right afterwards, I'd run all these 243s. And so when I realized how interesting the reasons for my mid-40s speed were, I realized that there's a bigger story to write about running and about the way that our psychology pushes us forward, holds us back, what our parents give us, what we give our children, and the way that running allows us to process pain and also create pain. And so that was the origin. I was like, well, this is big, right? This is important, right? Like a story about how Nick Thompson was a pretty good marathoner and then became slightly better than a pretty good marathoner. That's not a book, right? The story about how post-traumatic growth after cancer happens and how our fears of what happened with the sickness envelops us psychologically for a decade. Now that's an interesting story. The question of how you mourn a man as crazy as my father, that's an interesting story. So I began writing those two things, and then I also decided I wanted to make it bigger, right? I wanted to make it a story about running, what happens in the mind of a runner. So I also needed to write about other runners. And so that was the kind of the third element that I put into it.
Your dad, really one of the singular characters that has appeared in a book that I've read in recent memory. He operates as, in many respects, a part of the spine of this story. Your story of how you came to running, obviously deeply intertwined with your relationship with your father. Was it something that kind of scared you at first to take on, or is this something you kind of knew in the back of your mind once you unlocked the okay, I'm going to be talking about more than just how I became a slightly fast runner in my 40s. When did you know that you had to write pretty intimately about your father and your relationship with your father?
It was very clear. He is one of the most extraordinary characters. Like, just as an objective observer and as someone who's been in journalism, like, this is a guy who can hold the attention when you tell his life story. And so I knew from the beginning that he would have to be part of it. And then if it's a book about running, my life running is inextricably linked to him. Right? He's the one who taught me to run. My most important memories are of running. Like, I became a star when I was running at the school that he had guided me to. So he was tied up in all of it. To your question of whether it scared me, yeah, it definitely scared me, right? Because A, it's hard to cover deep emotions, right? It's hard to cover deep personal emotions. Two, it's hard to write about your family, right? Like, I mean, what are your sisters going to think? What's your mother going to think? What are your father's friends going to think? And I'm still, the book has been out in the world for a week and a half, or however long it's been out. And, you know, you're getting emails every day from people who knew him. I just got an amazing email from his girlfriend in 1959 who has the letters they wrote, and she's put them in the mail for me.
That's neat.
That's
really
cool, right?
Neat. Yeah.
That's cool.
That is very cool. So if, for those who have not yet read your book or are unfamiliar with the details of it, you know, we just sort of talked around it for a second there and talked about your father as this really compelling character. Give us a snapshot of that memoir aspect of this book.
Yeah, so my dad, he's not an athletic guy, and he grows up mostly in Oklahoma, also some in Providence. And his father had been his father's like a big guy, right? Golden Gloves boxing champion, you know, kind of like child of the homesteaders of the American West, like build your own house, you know, by hand and walk 7 miles through the desert to go to school. And his dad's this big tough guy, Golden Gloves boxing champion. And my dad's like, he's kind of uncoordinated. He doesn't want to play sports. He doesn't really like his home, and he feels like his family is broken. He learns about a school called Phillips Academy Andover, you know, a school for the elite, and reads about it in a magazine, applies, gets in, gets a scholarship, and leaves. And that begins like this journey for him into the higher echelons of the American meritocracy. He goes to Andover, he's behind, he catches up, works harder than everybody else. He gets a scholarship to Stanford, again, works as hard as you can possibly work, wins a Rhodes Scholarship. You know, the dean of the faculty says he's the greatest student we've had in 30 years. Best student's Herbert Hoover, which is kind of funny since Hoover had a checkered record as president of the United States. But in any case, my dad is like, John F. Kennedy says, this kid's going to be president, right? He's like photographed for the Saturday Evening Post. I mentioned his girlfriend at the time. You know, she's writing letters, she's writing diary entries about reading about him and saying, I guess I really will be first lady now. So he's like tapped for greatness, and that's important. You know, he goes to Oxford and his Rhodes Scholarship, he comes back and things are hard. You know, probably the line he said to me the most was, he whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make promising. And, you know, he couldn't live up to those expectations. He couldn't meet them. And that was hard. And he started drinking and kind of lost his way in the 1970s when he's in his 30s. And he should be like rising professionally, and he's struggling, right? And he's not writing books that people are reading. He's not running for office. He's, you know, he's not getting the jobs he wants. And then he realizes he's gay. And his running starts at about this time, the moment of self-actualization and sexual realization. You know, late 1970s, gym fix, running boom. Everybody's out there running. And so he starts training. And not coincidentally, his father dies at this point, and he feels like that frees him to succeed athletically. And so I'm a little kid at this point. He takes me out running. We run around the block. We run around, you know, our neighborhood in Boston. Maybe we ran a couple miles. Maybe we ran a mile. I don't know. Memory's fickle. He leaves my mother. He starts dating men. And I go and watch him run the 1982 New York Marathon. And I watch him come down the Queensboro Bridge. And it's a extremely important memory for me. He's trying to break 3 hours. He runs like a 3:01. You know, from there on, his life, it's very complicated. You know, he's out. He becomes the first openly gay presidential appointee, which is kind of amazing. He's actually one of the first people to be married under gay marriage laws in Massachusetts. He's sexually reckless. He's diagnosed as having HIV, and then he's told that it's a false positive by Anthony Fauci. He has a wonderful line about Fauci calling him, and he's like, I was sentenced to life. And then he has this, you know, absolutely reckless sex life where, he's with hundreds of men a year, and he dates these, like, to the extent he's ever dating monogamously, is with these horrible people, one of whom, steals all this art from high-end auction houses and buries it in our front yard. Just anytime he would go to a restaurant, would like walk out with the statues and put them in the back of his car. So my dad is like living with these terrible people. And then he has this very important and very sad thing happen. He has this guy he thinks of as his twin, a guy named Roger Hansen, who was also a Rhodes Scholar. He'd gone to Yale, been a swimmer, photographed by Alfred Eisenstadt for Life magazine on his graduation. Hansen also is closeted. Hansen also doesn't live up to expectations. And Hansen and my father become friends, and they bond over this. But Hansen's pretty depressed. And then one weekend, it's an interesting weekend. It might be exactly the same weekend when I'm at high school and I get cut from the basketball team and start running. But that weekend, Hansen goes to my father's house in Rehoboth, Delaware, and kills himself in the garage. And so my father then has to deal with, what does it mean when a guy you thought of as your twin and as one of your closest friends has like gotten depression and been so unable to deal with being closeted and the failure to live a promise that he kills himself. And so my father has this kind of sword of Damocles hanging over him. And I think that's a reason why, from then on, his life really starts to spin. It's hard to quite describe the mayhem, but, like he moves to Asia. And he moves to Asia because he has a scholarly interest, but also because he likes to date underage Asian, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, right? He finds them on the internet. He's finding prostitutes. He probably sleeps with like 400 people a year. Right? I'm not exaggerating.
My God.
And, he'll come to my house. There's this moment he comes to my house and it's like, my iPad is broken. I'm like, all right. I fix his iPad and I turn it on and there's like, turns out that it broke while he was ordering a prostitute to like come to the house as soon as I left for work. Not caring, I guess, that my children were there and their nanny. So it's just madness. People used to say, like, what do your parents do for a living? And I was like, well, my mom, she's an art historian in Boston. And my dad, he runs a male brothel in Bali.
And you're not kidding. Yeah.
I'm not kidding. And so like that, those are my parents. And so my dad, he ends up kind of bankrupt. I'm supporting him financially. I'm the lender of last resort. I'm the social support of last resort. But I stay close to him, and we stay close partly because of our mutual shared love of running, because it's something I keep doing. He's so supportive of it, and we stay close because he, loves my career and my ambitions and the places I work. So, interesting man, and a very complicated life. He dies in 2017, and then, as happened with his father, after my father died, that's when I started getting fast, really fast.
We'll get into the getting fast part in a minute here, because I am fascinated to unpack everything that you did and talk about some of the nitty gritty in a way that perhaps a non-running podcast wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, let's do that.
I want to nerd out. I want the secrets. I'm 45 years old. I feel like I can leave this interview knowing a little bit more about how I can unlock the last drips of my ability level at this age. But
the three best races I ran in my life were when I was 44, 45, and 49. So
music to my ears, Nick, and many of our audience members as well.
So last January, 2 weeks before the Houston Half Marathon, my coach made me do what he called the impossible workout. 30 minutes at threshold pace, followed by 1 kilometer of kicking, even faster. All of it at half marathon pace, which, for me, is about 4:56 per mile.
You had to slide that one in there, didn't you, sir?
My point is that running on frozen roads near my house in Toronto to do this workout sounded daunting, and going to some gym and running on a regular treadmill sounded even worse. Luckily, Michael had a Wahoo KICKR Run treadmill stashed in his home in northern Toronto, and so I took advantage of that last winter.
So that's why you kept coming over to my house all the time.
I mean, I also came for the company.
Sure.
And mainly for the KICKR Run's run-free mode, where the treadmill uses sensors to adjust its carpet speed so that it can respond to your running speed in real time. So it responds to you, and not the other way around. Now that was helpful for the workout's kick portion, so I could accelerate naturally without having to worry about pressing buttons all the time. The treadmill also comes with the lateral tilt feature, which will simulate the angles of running on a natural terrain. So every step is not the same, which is a good thing. And it's kind of like if you're running outdoors. And bonus, the KICKR Run connects with a laundry list of third-party apps, including Strava, the Wahoo Run app, and Zwift, so you can run free in Watopia.
It's quiet, simple, and effective. The treadmill follows you and not the other way around. It's available in the US, the UK, Germany, and Austria. And now you can get a free Headwind smart fan worth $319 when you order the KICKR Run from Wahoo Fitness using the promo code MHRUN. That's all one word, MHRUN. Take our word for it, as well as the professional athletes that use it, including ultra runner David Roche, triathlete Chelsea Sodero, Olympic gold medalist Cole Hawker.
And now, me!
And for the month of November, use that promo code and you will get 25% off the KICKR Run. That's a massive savings. So go to the link in our description to get your 25% off and the Headwind fan for free. All right, back to the show. You also fold in a beautiful amount of history of sort of the modern history of distance running. And I noted as well that there's kind of like a really eloquent kind of mirroring that you do in the writing, where, as you note at the very top of the book, there's a profound moment in your life that you mentioned earlier when we were just talking here at mile 16 after the Queensboro Bridge, New York City Marathon in 1982. It's this inflection point in your life, and you don't even know it because you're a young child. Yeah. And you're there waiting for your dad. It's this like highly impressionable moment in your life that becomes a signpost of who you are. And then I noticed that, the chapters are named after some of these and focus on some of these really interesting figures throughout the history of running. And that there's this kind of like nice mirroring of, I realized at the end of this book, like most of these characters are kind of there in New York. In 1982 when your dad's running the race. You go into detail talking about the fascinating life of Bobby Gibb, and you knew Bobby Gibb a little bit. Bobby Gibb, tell us a little bit about the adventures in interviewing and journalism that you underwent to put this book together for that aspect of it.
Yeah, so I wanted to write about characters who represent the themes of the book, but represent them in ways that go beyond what I can explain through my life. And so, I like to run in the woods. I can talk about running in the woods. I can talk about clearing my mind. I can talk about communing with the chickadees. I can talk about what it's like to summit a mountain. Bobby, she learns to run. She sees people run in the Boston Marathon, I think in 1965. She doesn't notice they're men. She says she wants to do it, right? She's obviously a woman. She, next summer, takes her parents' van, drives across the country, but each night finds a new park to sleep in and just runs for hours and then sleeps under the stars. Yeah. Like, this is the most awesome way anybody in the history of running has ever trained for a marathon, right?
Yeah. Super
doesn't
romantic.
know how far she's running, like doesn't know exactly what she's doing, like no idea splits. She's just like, basically one foot touches the ground and her, mind goes up to the universe, right? Like, God bless Bobby Gibb. So she enters the Boston Marathon, they write her back, they say you can't run, women can't run. She's like, what do you mean I can't run? I just ran 100 miles in Vermont, right? So she runs the Boston Marathon, like sneaks out of the bushes, and she's the first person to do it. Everybody gets it wrong because they all think it's Catherine Switzer, because there's this iconic photo of Switzer being, like the next year, Switzer being pushed off the race, but it's just factually incorrect. Like Bobby, as Bobby likes to point out, she not only ran it in 1966, she ran it in 1967, the same year that Switzer got pushed off the course, and was an hour ahead. Yes. But history just, for whatever reason, gets it wrong because there's such a wonderful photograph of Switzer, who's also a hero. Anyway, so Bobby's this incredible character, and I know about her, or I read about her, I meet her, I'm interested in her. I'm not sure I'm going to make her part of the book because I wanted people who like really connect with moments in my life. And she kind of connected, like my mother was a student at Wellesley when she runs the first Boston Marathon. And I interview Bobby a couple times. We talk, and she mentions that she has a son who's about my age. Oh, that's neat. And then I go and interview her out in Massachusetts, and we go to this coffee shop, and her son's there. And I'm like, wait, that's Leif Gibb. Like, that's my friend. And I realized that a friend of mine in high school was Bobby Gibb's kid. I just didn't know. It wasn't that close. And she hadn't, like, put together that I had gone to the school. And so then suddenly, like, wait a second, we were much more closely connected than I thought. And not only that, like, she was there at my high school graduation, which is this very important moment where my father gets blitzed out of his mind and, like, charges the stage when I win a big award. So, like, Bobby's there for, like, one of the central scenes in the book. So then she became a character in the book.
Yeah, that's amazing. I imagine you probably had to go on a couple of fishing expeditions here and there in constructing this book and exploring some of these ideas.
Oh, totally. Lots of fishing expeditions, like lots of letters I mailed to people I thought would be characters who then, cut me off or wouldn't return phone calls, like letters I sent to people in prison, like, I'm interested in talking to you, like, didn't call me back. And I just heard the most wonderful story, like a person who should have been in the book, but I hadn't reached. So I have this friend of mine from, her name is Lashandra. She grows up in Compton, and, tough background, and Compton in the 80s. And like my father, she hears about this school called Andover. But at the time she's running at a track, and she's killing it, right? She has this coach who becomes Allison Felix's coach. She runs a 50-second quarter mile at age 11, right? Which is crazy fast, right? But then she goes to Andover, right? She wants to get out, wants to get out in the meritocracy. She goes to Andover, and then she goes to Stanford, right? So we're buddies. She's like the younger girl on the track team who's just awesome. She goes to Stanford. She goes down to a meet at UCLA, and the coach who taught her in Compton, comes up to her and is like, Lashandra, you could have been an Olympian, but you blew it, right? And like, here you are, you're running like 2:06 at Stanford. Like, what are you doing, right? And maybe he was right. Maybe if she had stayed, she would have been an Olympian. And, life goes on, 20 years pass, and then she becomes a big deal. She becomes Joe Biden's COVID advisor, and so she's on TV all the time. Okay. And she gets a letter from the coach, and the coach is like, Lashandra, I was wrong. I'm really glad you did what you did, and every time I see you on TV, I record it. And it's like this incredible thing. So there are people like that. I would have put Lashandra in the book in a microsecond if I had known that story. I knew her. Yeah. I knew a little bit of her background. I didn't know that story of her coach. So anyway, the process of finding the right people who have like real emotional resonance was complicated. And there are some people I interviewed for a long time and talked to many times, and then they don't appear in the book. It's just the way it worked out.
Yeah. How long did you work on this book for?
5 years. It's crazy. It's
it
not a
feels
very
like
long
it's
book.
5 years.
But it's a hard book, right? It has like a lot of, like, as you said when you mentioned landing the plane, which I appreciate. It is not a simple. It's not like Nick went running, Nick was slow, Nick got fast. Here's what Nick did, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a boring book, and it's also a book I could have written in 3 months. This is a book about life and pain, and like what running actually means, and what goes on in a runner's mind when they run, and that is hard. And so it took a long time.
Let's take the opportunity to nerd out a little bit here.
Yeah, great. Sounds good.
So we'll give the people what they want, as it's a running podcast, right?
Yeah, sure.
So you were the editor-in-chief at Wired, and that coincided with the rise of Kipchoge and the sub 2 hour marathon attempts in 2017 and 2019 with Breaking 2 and the 159 challenge. And of course, Nike's development of super shoes and hydrogels by Morton, and really kind of where we're at now with modern marathon running. There's been such a huge change in the last 8 or so years.
Yeah.
And a central part of this book is you kind of getting to ride that wave yourself as a man in his 40s, trying to unlock something. Now, obviously, there's the much more profound unlocking that's going on emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. That is a huge part of this book, and I think the most interesting part of this book. But there's also like a great amount of nerddom in here. Let's talk about what you did differently. Let's talk.
Can I
about
put that on the
discovered.
back of the next edition? A great amount of nerddom in here, Michael Doyle.
You can absolutely quote me on that one.
Great. Thank you.
Don't worry. There's running nerddom. So what did you discover in your project, your personal project of becoming a better marathon runner?
Yeah, so the personal project had a bunch of components. So one is, really trying to push myself to run more miles. That's like the most simple thing, right? If you can run more miles, you go faster, right? But you run too many more miles, you break. And, trying to be a little scientific about it and like figuring that, like, given my life, given the demands in my life and my job, I could kind of fit 70 miles a weekend, right? And so I went from like 55 to 70, which is a big shift, and that's part of it. The real change is being much more focused in my VO2 max and threshold workouts, right? And being systematic. Twice a week, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to run, 8 by 100, 8 by 800, 16 by 400, right? Like 30 by 200, 4 by a mile, 6 by a mile. Becoming much more systematic about those threshold runs. Okay, I'm going to do, 2 by 5 miles, 3 by 3 miles, right? And, so that's a big part of it, right? Long runs, right? Can you be more structured in your long runs, right? Can you run the first 10 at 6:30, first 10 at 7:30, next 10 at 6:15, something like that. And so that's part of it. Part of it then is also like the diet, right? Can you be, not just defensive, not just like I'm not going to eat saturated fats, I'm not going to eat processed food, I'm not going to eat, hot dogs, but okay, what am I going to seek out? I'm going to seek out beet juice. I'm going to seek out these deep, dark leafy green vegetables. What is the meal I can most control? I can control breakfast, right? Okay, what is the perfect breakfast? Okay, I'm going to have this. Like, I'm going to have protein before I go to bed after a hard workout so it helps my body recover. What are the supplements I'm going to take? Okay, I'm going to take L-citrulline, right? Like, I'm going to take, I'm going to take L-citrulline. I'm going to take a little extra vitamin D, right? Right now I'm actually taking magnesium threonate to try to help me recover from the marathon, rhodiola in the morning, right? I'm doing, what can you do there? So then a little bit is diet. There was the Nike coaches were like really excited about trying to get me to cross train, but it didn't work. I got a busy job. I got 3 kids. I cross train with the kids. Like, I wrestle with them. I play with them. I play soccer with them. I run with them. If they want to go to the gym, I go to the gym. I'm not going to do any cross training without them. Right. Gear, that became really important. I obviously ran in the shoes. I ran in the Vaporfly 2s. I ran in the Vaporfly 3s. I was a low responder in the Alpha Flies, so I didn't race in them too much, though I do trail races in the Ultra Flies. I tried to get the 50-mile American record, ran a good race in the Puma Fast R3s. I had a pair of New Balance prototypes that I used when I won the Ekiden 50K a few months back. So, I try to shift the super shoes a fair amount. I learned to, run with really light socks. I learned to run with, compression shorts, which seem to keep my hamstring in a better place when I run instead of running in, just regular split shorts. I wore the special singlet that Nike made for Eliud Kipchoge, with all the like little holes in it. Not the crazy one he just wore in New York, but the one he wore a couple years ago. I remember thinking that I was probably the slowest person to ever wear that singlet, which was kind of cool. So there's a little bit of, the biggest gear change, by the way, was, I experimented with a RD pod on my waist and with power meters on my shoes and didn't really do anything. I've worn a Core heat sensor on my arm. It doesn't do anything. But having a heart rate monitor on my arm was massive. And being able to have an accurate heart rate data was a huge unlock for me. And I learned, okay, I can actually, in an ultra marathon, I will run the first, 20 miles. I will not let my heart rate go above 130. Miles 20 to 30, I won't let it go above 135, right? Miles 35 through 50, or 35 through 45, I won't let it go above 145, right? And I kind of I would make spreadsheets of what range I would allow my heart rate to be in. At different places in the races. So that was a massive unlock for me. I also learned, it's a little more philosophical, but maybe this is the most interesting. And so, I learned, I had been learning this before Nike, but before I started this Nike program, but it was, through conversations with Brett Kirby and Steve Magnus and others, but really getting to understand the central governor model and understanding that pain is a construct and that there are physical things that happen, but when you hurt in running, a lot of it is just about your mind being afraid. Okay, fine. We all know that. Probably everyone who listens to this understands the central governor model. But what is interesting about that is that then it means that your philosophy of training should be to reset the thermostat, right? So what I try to do is when I'm preparing for a race, I try to stress every system in my body more than it'll be stressed during the race, right? So I'll run 20 miles when I'm dehydrated, right? I will run down a mountain really hard so that my quads get stressed more than they will during the race. I woke up super sick 2 weeks ago, and I was like, oh man, better go running. It's a really good way to train my body to know what it feels like at the end of an ultra marathon, right? And so I go and run like 7 miles in Italy while I'm like puking on myself with a pounding headache. And just so learning to like stress the system so that the thermostat kicks in later. That's like one of the key things that I discovered.
That's really interesting because that's sort of a little bit counter to the approach right now from many elite athletes and kind of what coaches are talking about when they're talking about, like just optimizing all of this stuff. For example, like the debate about whether or not you train in super shoes, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you want to feel that speed and get that extra in your long run with a big block of marathon pace, or if you want to leave that for race day so it feels special when you put on a pair of super shoes on race day, and instead do all that hard work in a pair of trainers that are not giving you any sort of an extra edge. I like your approach, maybe partially because it's like a confirmation bias for me, because that's sort of how I've approached things as well over the years, where it's like stress your body, challenge yourself to work through what you're going to experience in a real high stress environment in a race.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like with shoes, my philosophy is I alternate them all the time because they put different stresses on your body. And so you don't want to run the same, like it might be the case that the Vaporflies stress your Achilles more, and I don't know, the R3s, I'm making this up, stress your quads more. So rotate them and like put different stresses. That way you'll have maximal impact and minimal risk of injury.
So one of your responsibilities in your day job is you have a podcast called The Most Interesting Things in AI. You're looking in very fine granular detail at what's on the horizon in tech, looking at AI, looking at technologies that are in front of us in terms of fitness, in terms of distance running, the marathon in particular. What's some interesting things you're seeing and you're excited about that could bring meaningful change to this sport that we do?
I think that the most exciting stuff is going to be internal data analysis. Like you're starting to see this with, Whoop and Oura Rings and Apple Watches and Garmin's, right? Where you can get your HRV, you obviously get your resting heart rate. You've been able to get that forever. You get your HRV. HRV is misleading, and maybe it's like a negative indicator at the moment because you put too much into it. It also makes people stop drinking, which isn't so great. But I do think that like the science of being able to get, we're soon be able to wear devices that measure much more and that even like send feedback that help our body, right? You'll soon have a watch that like not only measures your HRV, but is actually able to send signals that help you sleep deeper, right? And I think that, or maybe you'll have it in your ear, or maybe you'll have a face mask, and the face mask won't just block the light, but it'll like relax your eyebrows. I don't know. But the ability to get data and then send sort of signals back into the body, I think that's going to explode. I think that there's a real promise in the sort of the Whoop Apple Aura space to, help us understand. Like, I mean, who knows whether this might be circular, but I ran a terrible marathon. I ran the New York Marathon last week, missed my goal by 30 minutes. But I kind of knew that was going to happen because you could tell, like my resting heart rate was 15 beats a minute higher than it was. My Whoop recovery score had like averaged about 5 out of 100 for 2 weeks. Like something was wrong with me. And, I kind of knew it was wrong with me because I had a pounding headache when I'd wake up in the morning and felt terrible when I was going up to Verrazano. But like the ability to get refined data is super helpful. And then like blood data, right? And to like understand, okay, here are your hematocrit levels. Here's what you can do. Here's how your hematocrit levels have changed in the last 2 weeks. That'll be really useful. And the other thing, of course, I think that we're really starting to understand saunas and heat training, which appears to be, I thought it was just effective, like if you're going to go run a marathon in the desert, but it turns out it's good for everything, right? Like heat training, we'll understand better soon the benefits of altitude training. All that stuff's coming really well.
Yeah, there's been some research over the years that heat training, obviously boosts your red blood cell count quite significantly, and so just it's kind of like the poor man's version of altitude training, right? Like when in doubt, train for a fall marathon in the dead of summertime in New York City or Toronto, where I am, where it's like 95 degrees and 95% humidity, and you're going to get a benefit like you were living in Flagstaff.
Totally. And then like go do a sauna afterwards at the gym.
Yeah, exactly. We spoke with Bill Quinn, the futurist for TCS, who's the title sponsor for many marathons, including New York. And we did a live event in New York, and Bill was one of our guests. Futurist is a fascinating and opaque title, but
it's a great title. I
was jealous.
CEO to futurist, yeah.
Exactly. That's the pivot. He was musing about what's on the forefront. He's pretty hawkish on concepts like nanotechnology, which were kind of buzzy about 10 years ago and kind of haven't gone anywhere. Maybe just because of like the technology.
Buzzy like 30 years ago, and then it kind of went away.
Yeah.
So he thinks that nanotechnology is going to lead to like medical interventions?
Potentially, yeah. He was saying just your Garmin gives you all sorts of data, but what do you do with that data, right? And his thinking was, if pharmaceutical companies can gain approvals, that's the big if. Some technologies might come along and be able to solve some of these. I
think that is true. I think we're going to have like combination of AI, the combination of all the data that we're giving off, the combination of all the ways this data is being captured, I do think is going to lead to really interesting medical interventions, which will then have ethical questions, right? Like maybe you will be able to take a targeted pill that increases, I don't know, it'll increase Michael's hematocrit, but it won't increase Nick's, right? Like, yeah. So is that okay? I mean, I guess it's okay, right? Like where will the lines be drawn? Or maybe there's an intervention, but it costs $20,000, right? And it'll make you run 2 minutes faster. How do we feel about that, right? Because not that many people are going to take it, but some people will. Either people who care a ton about 2 minutes or care very little about $20,000.
Yeah, exactly. And you're going to see this like kind of poverty gap form, right? This potential, and I guess you already see it in very little ways, right? Like, a pair of super shoes aren't cheap. And so this book, the another part that I thought was really quite beautiful in this is when there's a section sort of in the last third of the book when you're talking about your time in Maine, and near and dear to my heart because a name popped up in the book where I was like, whoa, I actually know of this guy.
Oh, really? Which one?
Judson Cake.
You do, Judson?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I mean, I don't know him personally, but he's a legend of a race that I run every year, the Cabot Trail Relay in Nova Scotia.
I'd like to pause for a moment to say that I've talked to now hundreds, maybe thousands of people about the book, and not one person has said the thing that got me was that you mentioned Judson Cake. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And it must be really challenging for you to have decided what to keep and what to pare away in the editing process. But I thought that section was pretty profound. Tell me why it is that you kept that section.
You mean the whole Michael Westphal section? The whole section on like Cranberry Island?
Section, yeah.
Yeah, so,
let's talk a little bit about that.
All right, so I spent a lot of time up at this place in Maine. It's called Northeast Harbor. My grandparents bought a house there in the 1950s. It's a place where I learned to run, and I've often said that the only thing I care about in my running life is that I can run up Sargent Mountain from the back door of my grandparents' house until I'm 7 years old. And so I entered this road race, the Northeast Harbor Road Race. My father runs it maybe in the 1980s, and he loses it. He doesn't lose it. He comes in 10th place. This guy named Michael Westphal wins it. This carpenter who lives on Cranberry Island. He runs maybe 25 minutes in that race. I then run it in 2018 when I'm getting fast, and I come in second or third. The guy who wins it is this cop, Judson Cake, who works in Bar Harbor around the corner. And we chat afterwards, and we start running together. We're buddies. He's a good guy. He's like lots of fun. I run with him and this guy, Louis Lucchini, who's a Maine legend. Next year I come back and I beat Judson, so I win the race, right, which fulfilled the childhood dream. Then I come back in 2021. Judson and I train again. He'll work as a cop all night and meet me at the track at 6 a.m, and then he'll go to sleep all day. And we run it, and my son runs it. So I think Judson comes in second, I come in third, and we finish. We shake hands. We're running back to find my kid. And I see my kid, and he's running with this guy whose hands are like flailing all over it, and he's like going side to side. And I'm like, oh my God, Judson's that guy having a stroke. Is he okay? And Judson's like, dude, that's Michael effing Westphal. Like, who's that? And so I then, I asked Judson some more questions, and I learn a little bit about Westphal. And so then the next day I go out, I write to him, and I go out and visit him. He lives on this island a couple miles off the coast. It's like a 20-minute ferry ride. And this island called Cranberry Island, and it's got a wintertime population of about 40. Westphal grew up there in a big family. Dad worked as like a filmmaker in Boston, and Mom would keep him up on the island, and they'd have powdered milk and like venison in the freezer. And he learns to run because there's nothing to do, right? There are 40 people on this little island. There's one road, 2 miles. And so he starts running back and forth, back and forth. He takes the ferry to go to high school. He becomes a state champion. He's good. He runs like a 4:19 mile. Graduates college, comes back. He runs like 100 miles a week. And in fact, everybody on the island runs. There's 6 people on this island of 40 who break the 3-hour marathon, which is like crazy. Like, that's the highest density of elite runners outside of, Ethiopia. And so he's got a great running story, and he's just this great guy. And he builds all the houses. He's this strong carpenter. It's an island where there's year-rounders and summer people who have like these, flowing pools and private tennis courts. And he builds all those houses, builds the tennis courts, builds the pools, builds everything. And he's a strong guy. He's the caretaker for like 30 houses. And then when he's 49, he something goes wrong with his arm, right? He's like, oh man, my arm. And he thinks it's just from like digging holes. And then it's not that. And he goes, gets diagnosed. And it turns out he's got Parkinson's. And he's quite embarrassed at first, right? Like, what does it mean to like have Parkinson's? What does it mean to be strong and now suddenly to like be losing control of your body? What does it mean on a tiny island, right? Like in New York City, you can hide, right? You can like, people aren't going to see you. People aren't going to know. Something starts to go wrong with you. You can kind of get by, but you can't on Cranberry Island. And so he's embarrassed at first, and then he says, you know what? This is what it is. And he stops being afraid, and he goes out and. People sometimes, if they have a weird reaction to him, like people get awkward around folks with Parkinson's, right? Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But he's like, whatever, here we are. And so then he starts running, and he's fast. He runs a 3:16 marathon with full-on Parkinson's. His arms flail all over the place. He becomes the world's fastest runner with Parkinson's. He runs a Boston qualifier, right? There's not like a special Parkinson's division. It's just the division, right? He's like 54 to 59. And so I go out and see him. He's in his mid-60s then. He'd run maybe 44 minutes in that 5-mile race. And he tells me his life story. And we go out, and we drive along the island. I've got my kid there. It's first terrifying because he's you get in the car with him, and you're like, how is he possibly going to drive? But of course he can do it. He's Michael Westphal. And so I go out there every summer. So that was the summer of 2021. And so now 2025. And then in 2024. I went out and saw him. He told me he'd stop running. He couldn't do it. He'd run as long as he could, and it was now too dangerous. He would fall if he ran. There's even a hill. He was pretty sad about it, pretty wistful. And so that's how the chapter ends. And then that's kind of how the bit of the book ends. And then I wanted to go see him this summer. The book is done. And I give him a galley of the book. Here, Michael, here's the book I wrote. And I brought another one of my kids. I have 3 boys, and I brought my youngest boy. And we talked for a couple hours, and then... I'm like, well, I got to catch the ferry back, but I want to go run the road. My kid and I are going to go run. And he's like, no, I'm coming with you. And he had like gotten better, and he had like wanted to run again. And so he ran a half mile or so with me and my son, and he ran back home. It was truly, truly beautiful. But he's a hero. He's just a guy who he runs for the most beautiful reasons, just to remind himself that like he's alive, he's out there, this thing happened, it is, and he's just going to keep going as long as he can.
Yeah, I thought that was such a beautiful sort of like it functions within the overall structure of the book, but also it's this eloquent essay that exists on itself unto itself, right? And it does indeed capture the essence and the challenges of running, and also like the complexity of running, right? Because running can become so much about ego, about performance, about numbers, about winning. And obviously this guy was, a star runner and a winner. and that can become so much a part of your identity. And then to have to learn the humility in this situation is a really profound story. How did you know you were done this book? Like, how did you know when you had all the pieces? Was it just a deadline, or was there something else?
No, it was something else. I don't know exactly when I knew I was done. I finished my first draft 2 years ago, but it wasn't there yet. It wasn't ready. I mean, I sent it. Well, one of the things that I was blessed by is that, having worked at the New Yorker and the Atlantic and Wired for, like, my whole social circle just happens to be amazing editors. Like, they're just too much friends.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of really great people read the book. And I had one friend who read 6 versions of it. And, they have really smart feedback. But you can kind of tell, like, you do certain things in life, right? Adam Grant talks about this really well. Like, you're a busy person and life is complicated. There's some things in life where it's okay to get 7 out of 10, right? And you go through your day and you plan your day and you're like, I'm going to get, I'm going to get 7 out of 10 on this, and I'll do like a 6 out of 10 effort on this, but I'm going to get 10 out of 10 on this, right? And like, I'm not going to stop until I think this is a 10 out of 10. And, that's like the book. I felt like I wasn't going to stop, and I was going to keep working on it, keep trying to improve it until I felt it was by far the best thing I had ever written, until it was something that would make people like cry and feel something. And I finally got to that point, right? The feedback I was getting from people was like, this book opened my mind to things that I'd never thought about, or like, I read your book and like it was tears all over the pages. And so when it was there, I was like, okay, now I'm done. And then once I had that, then I also like went through it again a few more times, like trying to make it tighter, trying to make it shorter, trying to compress it, make sure you could really get through it. But then I was done.
Yeah. I mean, like, running is such a complicated thing. It's such it's so pure and simple on one level, but then, why we run is a multi-layered psychological exploration for most of us. Certainly in your case, and in many others' cases, like, you come to running because perhaps you have a parent that was a total running junkie as well. There's some interesting parallels here. Like, one of the major elements of this book is discussing the sort of hinge point in one's life at around 40, about the halfway point, more or less. You hope less, but and how your father had a really kind of a negative and kind of a existential outlook on turning 40. And this book is kind of beautifully grapples with that, because it's about you kind of discovering a lot about yourself and about your running after 40.
My dad wrote this note on my Facebook page when I turned 40. He's like, hey, happy birthday. Things look like they're going well for you, but every man's life falls apart at 40. The forces in this world are just too hard to contain. It's like, thanks, Dad. Can you send me an email? And he believed that his father's life had fallen apart at 40 and his life had fallen apart at 40. Like, he just lost control, right? And at that point, you can't, like, a lot of things happen at this age. So for one, you're at a moment of peak responsibility, right? You're taking care of your children, you're probably taking care of your parents, right? And certainly financially, you're on the hook for yourself, them, and them. Most cases, if you're fortunate, maybe your parents are able to take care of themselves, but who knows, right? So you have those pressures. You also have the fact that you can no longer rely on youthful promise, right? Like, you can't, if you're not doing well, maybe you're not on track, right? Like, and this is what he felt like. He, when he was up to 30, he could still say, I'm going to be a senator, right? But by the time he was in his 40s, like, it was pretty clear he's not going to be a senator. So you either make peace with that or you don't make peace with that. And, and then it's this age where, what happened to him is one of my diagnoses of him is that you start to get old and you start to worry about death. And he tried to fend off death by, like, dating all these younger men, right? And it happens to lots of men where you're like, oh my God, I'm still like a strong sexual animal. And so this is why so many men our age, like, go and have these, relationships with much younger women. of my dad, much younger men. And so you have these pressures, and the rational response is like, not the rational response, my preferred response is like, you just deal with it, do your job, like be a reasonable person, like, stay married to the woman you love and are committed to, and, support your parents and your children, and then like your children will support you when you're older. Like get through it. Like every stage in life is hard. It's hard to be a teenager. It's hard to be in your 20s. It's hard to be in your 30s. It's hard to be in your 70s, right? And it's complicated to be in your 40s. Anyway, so that's my view of it. But the thing I read about in the book is that after he wrote that, I realized, okay, I don't want what happened to my dad at 40 to happen to me. And part of what happened to my dad is he lost his discipline. He lost like the forces that helped his life stay together. One of those things for me is running. One of those things for him was also running. So I am going to keep running, and I'm going to be disciplined. No matter what else happens in my life, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go running tomorrow. And, so in some ways, my obsession with this sport is a way to like fend off becoming like my dad.
Your dad had an unfinished memoir, which you quote within this book, and you now have a finished version for yourself here. Now,
my dad's memoir. Can I say something about my dad's memoir? So my dad's memoir.
Fascinated by it. I'm curious as to what the reading experience is like.
It's crazy. So it opens up. I get the book. I don't read it until after he's dead. And it opens up and it's like, to my 7 grandchildren, may my lessons of like life help you. I'm like, oh, great. That's so sweet, Dad. That's really nice. And like page 1 is, I've led an interesting life. I hope some of these lessons, it's probably page 3, where he starts to like get into the different penis sizes of men of different races that he's had sex with. And I'm like, God. Dad, like
you're like, this is not going to help my kids. Okay.
How is this going to help the kids? Like, and so, I was reading it. I really was like on board with him for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you're just like,
no.
Yeah. But I got through the whole thing. So.
Yeah. And there's some interesting elements in there that you quote and quite strategically quote in there. And I will say that overall you have, you found a way to describe like obviously a really complicated relationship, but at the same time, it's pretty apparent that you have consciously learned from your experience having that relationship with your father, and also there's like quite a bit of love there as well.
And I forgive him, right? And that's like, I think that has resonated. One thing that people have told me after they finish the book is like, the forgiveness is important and like it affects them.
Yeah, absolutely. So this book is hugely introspective, obviously. And where are you at now with running? Like Nick Thompson looking forward in your life. We talked about Michael Westphal and his ability to endure through Parkinson's disease and continue to run. And refuse to just disappear into his own illness. We're all slowly dying, right? I'm 45 years old. You're a couple of years older than I am.
Is your life falling apart? Or you're good?
No, all's good so far. Although
your newsletter's awesome. It's very nice talking to you.
Yeah, I'm running the Philly Marathon in a week and change. We'll see how that goes. But I might be a very close brush with mortality there. But what's your relationship to running like at this stage in your life?
Well, it's different, right? So I'm more in ultra world. Like I started running ultra marathons in COVID, and now, I was thinking back. Okay, what did I do this year? I ran a 50K race in Brooklyn, which was great. I ran a 50-mile race in Connecticut, which was great. I then took some time to recover. I ran a sub 5-minute mile on my 50th birthday with my son, which was amazing. Then I ran a 100K race in the mountains. Then I ran the Grand Canyon, and then I ran the New York City Marathon, where I completely sucked. And so I had like success, abject failure. And so now I'm figuring out what I'm going to do next. My son, my 15-year-old son, this is great. I come in after the marathon, and like no one knows, I ran a 3:06. I had like started out thinking I was going to run 2:30. And I was like, I'll 235. And then I was feeling sick. So I was like, okay, fine, 245. I come and I run 306, and like everybody's like, good job, Nick. That's great. 306 is so fast. That's incredible, right? And I'm like, yeah, thank you. It's great. You know, every marathon is beautiful. Like finish line is just great. Like love the fans. And I'm like, you know, being cheerful, sending all these text messages. Come home, still sending these text messages. Yeah, it's great. Here's a photo. I feel awesome. Like what a day. It's beautiful. My son comes in. It's 15, and he's like, Dad, what was that? And I was like, and he's like, do not post that race on Strava. Do not tell anybody you ran it. Enter the next marathon you can find and bury that garbage. I was like, okay, son. And it's actually good because like that's kind of how I felt too, right?
Yeah. That's a very runner mentality right there that your son's
it was
got.
Just,
that's
yeah,
like, wow.
Yeah, it's like my son and David Goggins, like the only two people who would respond that way.
Exactly. It's like, suck it up, Buttercup. All right, back out there. Yeah,
it was great. And so, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have as you know, I may enter another marathon before the end of the year. Right? May just try to find one in Brooklyn and just try to go back and run 245. Like run what I should have run. I may not. You know, depends how well I've recovered after this. So I'll figure out in the next week or two. And then next year, I'll probably, you know, the race, the record that, the coolest record out there, the record that I'd love to break is it's the age 45 and up 50-mile record. And it was set by Ted Corbett at age 50. So it's both age categories. It's the fastest time, right? And he did it in 1970, and it's held for
a long time ago. Yeah.
55 years. So he ran 5:35, which is, I think, 6:41 pace for 50 miles. And I took a crack at it in April, and I held on for 44 miles, and I missed it. My friend Harsha, one of my training partners, took a crack at it at Tunnel Hill. He got faster than any 45 to 49-year-old, but not faster than a 50-year-old. He took a crack at it. So I think both of us are going to try to run together and try to run that. That's the age group. Michael Wardian wanted to try to break that at Tunnel Hill. It's a great record. It's just like, it's out there for someone to break. So I'd love to do that. And I also, I entered my qualifier for Western States. You know, I'll probably try to run some crazy mountain race. And then I'm going to do a bunch of track workouts with my kid.
I love it. So the hack is to just keep goal oriented, to keep putting things down on the calendar and keep focused on the future, on the near future.
Yeah, you know, if I were a better man, I could just be fully spiritual in my running. You know, if I had like a little more, if I was like 20% more of the Buddha in me, but I got you know, for Nick, it sometimes helped out. I mean, I do run these ultra races now where I'm not worried about time, I'm not worried about place, right? I do have a much more zen relationship to the sport. It's much more about self-transcendence than it is about, you know, self-understanding, self-knowledge, right? And it's, you know, my relationship to the running has changed, but I'm not above trying to get a Strava segment here and there.
You're preaching to the choir here. The book, is this your first and last running book, or do you feel like there's something else to be said
certainly nothing else to be said about my running. You know, I could imagine writing about other runners, like that woman, Chandra, I mentioned earlier. I could imagine maybe there'll be another runner whose life captures my imagination, who I want to write about. I don't know enough about training to write a training book. You know, I don't know enough about gear to write a gear book. The only thing I can write about is people and stories, and maybe there'll be a mystery. Like one of the best things I ever wrote was a story about a hiker who, you know, died on the Appalachian Trail and nobody knew who he was. And I wrote, it was one of the most read stories in the history of Wired. It's called Mostly Harmless, and became a movie. You know, maybe there'll be a story about a runner that you envelop sort of universal themes of life that I want to write about. But I don't know what that story is yet. But if anybody does, nxthompson@gmail.com. There we go.
The inbox is open. I love it. Yeah. All right. Nick Thompson, the book is The Running Ground, A Father, a Son, and the Simplest of Sports. It is available now. It is the best running book and one of the best books I have read this year. And I'm not just saying that because I'm interviewing you. I deeply enjoyed it. I found it very relatable. I think everyone listening will definitely find something in it as well. And it's just incredibly entertaining. Well done, sir, and thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was great to chat with you.
All right. Thanks very much to Nick Thompson for joining us today. The book is The Running Ground, A Father, a Son, and the Simplest of Sports. It's available now. You can get anywhere you get your books. It's also available as an audiobook. And what's really neat is Nick actually read the audiobook unabridged and does a lovely job reading the book as well. So you can find it on Audible and Spotify and where you get audiobooks as well. All right. Make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. It goes out every day of the week at 5:05 Eastern time. That's where you can find out about the interviews that we're doing on a regular basis now. We're trying to put them out on the weekends as something a little extra to add into the podcast feed. Subscribe to our Run Long, Run Healthy newsletter and podcast as well. That goes out on Fridays. It's a separate podcast as well you got to subscribe to. So jump on that. It's all about the science of the sport with Brady Homer and Thomas Watson. It's amazing. And YouTube. Make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel. We are putting out all kinds of new stuff, including fun secret new project that we've been working on, which will pop into our feed probably in the next week or so. It's a fun new show. I'll just tease it. It's called Run Like Hell.